Hello and welcome to this edition of our special series, World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. There are 26 different active conflicts that are ravaging different parts of the world. And the biggest of them all, the Russian war in Ukraine, has now entered into its most decisive phase. Pope Francis recently remarked that the Russian war on Ukraine might have been provoked, as NATO was barking on the gates of Russia. But is this really the case? If invading into Ukraine was meant to push NATO away from the Russian borders, then this plan has spectacularly backfired. NATO, forever eager to showcase its military preparedness, this week flew its F-35 fighter jets over the Baltic states to showcase NATO's commitment to the region. There's been more violence in Palestine as the Israeli forces, while carrying out a raid in the Palestinian city of Jenin, have shot dead 3 people and injured a 4th one in a car. According to the Israelis, the 3 people in the car had shot at the Israeli forces first. More than 100 people have been killed in Burkina Faso after armed men opened fire in the town of Seitenga in the Sahel region in the north of the country. The massacre is said to be the second worst in the history of Burkina Faso that's been battling a deadly Islamist insurgency since 2015. But let's start this episode with the biggest war zone of the moment, Ukraine. The most pitched battles in Ukraine are now being fought in the city of Severodonetsk. Almost reminiscent of Mariupol, the Ukrainian defenders in Severodonetsk have dug themselves in at the Azot chemical plant. According to reports, there are an estimated 500 civilians who are caught in the crossfire, and their condition is said to be very dire. The Russian Defense Ministry has put out videos like this of using the 2 S-19 MSTA self-propelled howitzers to break the Ukrainian resistance. Russia has reduced one Ukrainian city after another to rubble. On the 16th of June, a food factory in Kharkiv was hit by a Russian shell. At least 5 trucks and a tractor were destroyed. In the city of Irpin, that is just about 16 kilometers northwest of Kiev, 71% of all buildings have been damaged. This has forced the residents to now take refuge in train carriages. Shopping malls have also been at the receiving end of the Russian onslaught. This CCTV footage shows the moment when a Russian shell smashed through a supermarket's roof. An estimated 20,000 battle-hardened soldiers are putting up a stout defense against the Russian aggression in the Donbas region. In this war of artillery guns, Russia has been able to field at least 10 artillery guns for every single one that Ukraine has managed to lay its hands on. Pavlo, a Ukrainian soldier on the front lines of the Donbas, gives us a glimpse of what the battlefield looks like.
The situation is tight, shooting all day long. There could be pauses for an hour or two, but the shooting is quite often. Artillery grenade launchers, they throw everything they have, in here and in the rear, all along the line of contact. Today they shot at us very often. They shot shrapnel above us today. It exploded somewhere in this vicinity.
More than 110 days into the war, over 20% of the Ukrainian territory is now under Russian control. So what does Russia intend to do with this Ukrainian territory? Will Russia negotiate to return this territory back to Ukraine? As artillery shells continue to rain down, the answer for these questions has now slowly started to take shape. Ukraine's resistance is bolstered by the fact that it has the West's back to lean on. It's been a week of diplomacy as the leaders of France, Germany, Italy and Romania met with Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev. The optics were clear. This was the Brotherhood of Europe that stood with Ukraine against the Russian aggression. More weapons and more aid has been promised, but more importantly, Ukraine's bid to join the EU has received a major boost. But with Russia chipping away at Ukraine's territory one city after another, it is difficult to predict what the map of Ukraine will look like once this war ends. Putin is a great admirer of the Russian Tsar Peter the Great. On the 11th of June, the Russian president, while meeting some Russian entrepreneurs, let slip a comment that many analysts point out is Putin's real end game for this war.
When Peter the Great founded the new capital of St. Petersburg, no European country recognized it as Russia. Everybody recognized it as Sweden. And Slavic people have always lived there along with the Finno-Ugric people, and the territory was under the control of Russian state. The same goes for the western direction of his early campaign, the Battle of Narva. What was he doing? Redeeming and reinforcing. That's what he did. And it looks like it fell on us to redeem and reinforce as well.
More than defending Russian turf against NATO's eastward expansion, this is increasingly beginning to look like Vladimir Putin's empire-building project. Guantanamo Bay is the world's most infamous detention center. It is a living legacy of America's war on terror. Everything that transpired behind the barbed wires of the Guantanamo Bay was classified information. The American military tightly controlled what the outside world could and could not see. But now, more than 20 years later, for the very first time, the official photographs of the detainees held within the confines of the Guantanamo Bay have been made public. These photographs that we are about to show you were obtained through the Freedom of Information Act by the New York Times. Captured by the official US military photographers, these pictures of the detainees were meant for the eyes of the top defense officials. Chief among them was Donald Rumsfeld, the then Secretary of Defense. In the past, there have been leaks. In 2011, WikiLeaks had outed thousands of pages of documents called the Gitmo files. Ever since the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center opened on the 11th of January in 2002, exactly 4 months since the 9/11 attacks, a total of 780 detainees, also called the prisoners of America's war on terror, have been held in this facility. As of today, an estimated 39 prisoners still remain inside this military prison as terror suspects. This picture is from inside a US Air Force cargo plane that shows the very first of the prisoners being brought to the military prison, handcuffed and blindfolded. A crew member on the flight had stuck an American flag in the hands of one of the detainees, while another detainee was very tightly bound by duct tape. Over the years, Guantanamo Bay has been slammed for human rights abuses, for the gruesome methods of torture that were employed as part of the interrogation process, for allegations of sexual abuse, and for indefinite detentions without trials or without even charges being leveled. The youngest detainee of Guantanamo, Omar Khadir, was just 15 years old when he was locked up in the prison. He was released 13 years later in 2015. While the oldest prisoner is 73-year-old Saifullah Paracha, who spent the last 17 years in detention without any charges against him. First-person testimonies have only confirmed the torture and the abuse which the Guantanamo detainees were subjected to. A film called The Mauritanian was made on the basis of a memoir written by Mohammed Saleh, who recounts his 14 years at the Guantanamo Bay, where he was held without a charge. What's also embarrassing for the Americans is that 5 detainees from the Guantanamo prison are now a part of the Taliban government in Afghanistan. Instituted under George Bush as part of his war on terror, the Guantanamo Bay detention facility has spanned 4 presidents, with several human rights agencies calling for it to be immediately shut down. But the United States has chosen not to shut it down. Now, George Bush has said that he would like to see the Guantanamo Bay detention center closed, but it won't be an easy task. Barack Obama described Guantanamo Bay as a sad chapter in American history. In 2009, he even signed an executive order to try and shut it down, but the Republicans scuttled his efforts in the Senate. Donald Trump reversed Obama's order and vowed to keep the prison open, while Joe Biden has revived Obama administration's efforts to close down the prison. Guantanamo Bay Detention Center is a bit like the albatross, which the United States still chooses to carry around its neck. Instead of strengthening the American hand in its war against terror, it ended up weakening the American voice on the question of upholding human rights. Communist Beijing considers Taiwan to be a renegade province of a single China, which seceded in 1948 at the end of the war for the control of the country between the communists led by Mao Zedong and the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek. Beijing has never hid its ambition to conquer Taiwan and make it a part of Communist China. Under President Xi Jinping, the rhetoric first became more strident. And now, Beijing has threatened an all-out war that could explode into an unimaginably dangerous world war as America renews its promise to protect Taiwan's independence. At the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore on the 11th of June, the American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin accused China of becoming more coercive and aggressive.
We'll also stand by our friends as they uphold their rights. And that's especially important as the PRC adopts a more coercive and aggressive approach to its territorial claims. In the East China Sea, the PRC's expanding fishing fleet is sparking tensions with its neighbors. In the South China Sea, the PRC is using outposts on man-made islands bristling with advanced weaponry to advance its illegal maritime claims.
Chinese response came the very next day, and it was nothing short of a threat of all-out war if the Americans got involved.
First, China will definitely realize its reunification. China's reunification is a great cause of the Chinese nation, and it is a historical trend that no force can stop. If anyone dares to secede Taiwan from China, we will not hesitate to fight. We will fight at all costs. And we definitely will fight to the very end. This is the only choice for China.
The substance of what was said by the Chinese defense minister has been said many times before. But what is new is the open threat of war for anyone seen to be siding with Taiwan. In this case, the threat was squarely directed at the United States. The American policy on Taiwan is strategic ambiguity. Reportedly, this is meant to create doubt in the minds of the Chinese leadership about the possibility of American involvement and the potential cost of annexing Taiwan. But a more assertive and a belligerent China appears to be more willing to call the American bluff. For 3 times in the last few months, the American President Joe Biden has committed to defending Taiwan militarily in case it is invaded by China.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made.
But each time, the White House has walked back on the president's commitment, clarifying that America's Taiwan policy remains unchanged. At its narrowest point, the Taiwan Straits are just about 110 miles apart, separating mainland China from Taiwan. But these troubled waters threaten to emerge as a flashpoint in a conflict that can potentially pit the Chinese dragon against the United States. In recent years, China has repeatedly sent its fighter jets into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. On the 30th of May, there was panic in Taiwan's skies as over 13 Chinese warplanes were spotted in Taiwan's ADIZ. Now, these sorties are called grey zone tactics. They do not breach the threshold of combat, but constantly check Taiwan's ability to counter such sudden incursions. Last year, there were a total of 969 incursions by the Chinese warplanes, in comparison to the 380 that had been carried out in 2020. Taiwan has to stay on high alert all the time. It has equipped itself with a formidable arsenal, but militarily it is still no match for the Chinese. Now, China spent a staggering $293 billion as its defense budget for the year 2021. In comparison, Taiwan's defense expenditure was less than $17 billion. Now, China outnumbers and outguns Taiwan in every aspect of warfare. But this military superiority on paper does not guarantee a straightforward victory. It would also seriously test America's appetite for a full-blown conflict with the Chinese dragon. Any military misadventurism by China would mean global isolation. Now, China's export-driven economy will end up losing the wealthy consumption-driven markets of Europe and North America. The death toll would of course be horrific. Thousands of lives will be lost, and the world economy will plunge into a deep recession. But for China, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. It may win Taiwan, but Beijing's ambitions of global domination will drown in the Taiwan Straits. Democratic Republic of Congo is under attack. the M23 rebel group claims to have captured a key border town in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But the Congolese army has accused neighboring Rwanda of fomenting the violence. So what is really happening in Central Africa, and why does it threaten to destabilize the whole region? Our export gets you the details.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is in the throes of a major conflict yet again. According to reports, the M23 rebel group has seized control of the eastern border town of Bunagana, located just 60 kilometers northeast of Goma in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
Qui constitue ni plus ni moins.
This is nothing less than an invasion of the DRC, and the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo will take all necessary measures and defend their territory.
Et défendront la patrie.
The occupation has sent over 30,000 civilians fleeing into the neighboring Uganda. Interestingly, the Congolese army, in a statement, claimed that it was the Rwandan troops that had occupied the border town. Congo has repeatedly accused Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels, whose leadership hails from the same Tutsi ethnic group as the Rwandan president Paul Kagame. This claim, though, has been vehemently and repeatedly denied by Rwanda. Not only has Rwanda denied any involvement, it has leveled counter-accusations against Congo of collaborating with another militia group, the FDLR, or Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, for fomenting trouble with Rwanda. Relations between the two Central African nations have been fraught for decades. The origin of the conflict can be traced back to the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Rwanda alleges that DRC gave refuge to the ethnic Hutus who had taken part in the genocide, in which an estimated 800,000 ethnic Tutsis were killed. This tit-for-tat exchange of accusations between these two nations has exacerbated the already precarious security situation in Central Africa. Innocent civilians have been caught in the crosshairs of this recent conflict. Over the past month, thousands of Congolese have been forced to flee from their homes.
Earlier in a similar war, we were in a house and heard indiscriminate shooting. We were very scared and decided to run away, but when we went back, my husband had been killed. I have been struggling alone with my children since then. I have nothing to give them. I have suffered until now.
Tensions between Kinshasa and Kigali have escalated in recent weeks. Each side has accused the other of cross-border shelling.
What happened to us is very tragic. My child was not sick, and I knew he was playing with his friends not far from home. And then I learned that he died. I was in utter shock, and what a death. He was in 1,000 pieces. It's a great tragedy.
It is difficult to predict how things will unfold from here. But keeping in mind the violent history of the rebel groups and ethnic tensions in Central Africa, things between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have clearly taken a turn for the worse.
Is North Korea preparing for another nuclear test? According to the South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin, the preparations for a nuclear test have already been made, and only a political decision by North Korea's top leadership needs to be made. The Korean peninsula has witnessed a calibrated upping of ante. North Korea uses missile launches to communicate with the outside world. And on the 5th of June earlier this month, North Korea fired no less than 8 short-range ballistic missiles. The missiles flew a distance of anywhere from 110 to 670 kilometers. They were fired from 4 different areas, including Sunan near Pyongyang. This is the highest number of missiles that North Korea has test-fired in a single day. Now, for those who are familiar with North Korea's mode of communication, this was an angry growl, a protest against the 3-day military drills that were conducted by the United States and South Korea. The joint military drills also involved the USS Ronald Reagan, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Joint military drills of this scale, involving a US aircraft carrier, have happened for the first time since 2017. Pyongyang has consistently denounced the US-South Korea military drills as nothing more than rehearsal for staging a ground invasion of North Korea. Events unfolding in the Korean peninsula have undergone a qualitative change in the last few days. As a response to North Korea's 8 missile launches, the United States and South Korea responded by firing exactly 8 missiles into the east coast of the Korean peninsula. These missile launches are a show of force and not specifically aimed at any targets. Their purpose is to communicate with the other side, but the American response did not end with the return fire of 8 missiles. On the 7th of June, the United States and South Korea followed this up by flying their fighter jets to demonstrate air superiority over the Yellow Sea. An estimated 20 warplanes, including the F-35A stealth fighter jets, took part in these exercises. The video released by the South Korean military is impressive, but it points to a dangerous escalation. Simultaneously, there are signs of preparation for a possible nuclear test by North Korea that are visible via satellite images since March at Punggye-ri. North Korea, remember, had shut down this nuclear testing facility back in 2018 in front of international media with much fanfare. But the latest satellite images show that North Korea has now reopened one of the tunnels of Punggye-ri. A nuclear test by North Korea will be its 7th nuclear explosion since 2006, and also its first one since September 2017. On the 21st of May, Joe Biden was at Seoul for a summit meeting with South Korea's new president, Yoon Suk-yeol. And on being asked what message he had for the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, this is all he had to say.
Hello. Period. Thank you.
Hello, period. Just the 2 words. Joe Biden, remember, is a seasoned diplomat with over 50 years of experience in his kitty. His predecessor, Donald Trump, who ran his diplomacy through tweets and tariffs, held 3 summit-level meetings with Kim Jong-un after boasting of who had a bigger nuclear button that was ready to be pressed. The 3 Trump-Kim summits failed to get a breakthrough, but Donald Trump at least became the first sitting American president to set foot on the North Korean soil at the DMZ. In contrast, Joe Biden's North Korea policy appears limited to matching Kim Jong-un missile for a missile, with the crisis escalating in an ever upward spiral. Can people who live in a war zone ever dream of a normal life? These college students in the city of Kharkiv decided to celebrate their graduation day in the best way possible. But the only problem is their college was recently bombed by the Russians, and it presently lies in complete ruins. So they staged a dance performance in front of their destroyed college building. These students just wanted to show to themselves and to the rest of the world what life could have been like without the war. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. Thanks for watching.